Sophia, please call them in to come from the outside.
We're starting, right?
Yeah.
Osim Agate, znači samo vas dvoje vodite konverzaciju.
Evo, Agata je tu. Okay, she's waiting in a Zoom room. Please let her in.
Ja sam nju pustio. Ne ušla. Ušla, samo treba da sam mutuje i da pusti kameru.
I am here. Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear
Oh,
me?
Agata. Look at Agata.
I'm sorry, my dog took part.
Oh, can I see him? Can I see him?
Probably very soon. He's just barking at the door right now. But yeah, you will see him. I hope he's gonna stop in a second.
Antonio.
Antonio, come.
Antonio, don't create a chaos. Molim vas, publika, ako možete malo bliže da imamo osjećaj da nas ima puno. It's the end of the day, so everybody is tired, but they're all excited.
How is the conference going?
It's going very well. Yeah, Ivan, how is it going?
It's perfectly, it's tight, it's on schedule most of the time.
Beautiful. It's a really beautiful room you have over there. I wish I was there.
This is what's the name of the room? It's called Ceremonial Hall.
Beautiful. It really is
Yeah.
nice. I really hope my dog will stop barking. He never barks. He only barks when I have meetings.
Because he wants to participate.
He always does.
Okay, so Agata, možeš li da snimaš ovo?
Da snimam sljedeći. Pustio sam snimanje.
Snimaš ga? We're recording this just for you to know.
I realize, yeah.
We would like to record this, and obviously that will be put on YouTube after you check everything,
Of course.
because we would like to have your presence connected to the conference. I have some more people here. Imaš neko da mi dođe? Ajde. Okay. So I think we can start, right?
I'm ready whenever you're ready.
Okay. So it's a bit strange because I'm looking here and looking there, but it's okay. Are we live streaming as well on Zoom?
Yes.
Yeah. Znači, uživo smo na Zoom. So we're live streaming as well, and we're recording. Antonio.
Antonio, quiet. Hey.
Okay. Inače, Antonio, just to explain who is Antonio. Antonio is a beautiful Great Dane, which is kind of like that. And he's still a puppy. So
He
there you go.
is. I apologize. He will. He's coming here. Hey, say hello.
Ođo, Milica moja, vidi ga kakav je lepi Antonio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
And Antonio is looking at you like, why are you there? Why are you not in the park with me?
He will. He
Okay,
will
guys.
go afterwards.
Okay.
The weather is horrible
So,
here. So
well, it's amazing here, Sunny. Okay, we're gonna start.
yes.
So Agata Lulkowska is it right? Lulkowska, right?
Lulkowska, very close. Yes.
Very close. Sorry. Considering that my last name is Dundjerovic, I should be able to say your last name properly, right? You're associate professor in Staffordshire University, and one of the leading author on the performance practice research, which is very important for UK. Agata published a book in 2024, and so it's a very active and living, present academic. So we're very proud of that. I'm going to let you talk about all these things. Agata is running a platform for online research where different people are coming, and I was guest as well, called Rebellious Research. So she will be talking about that as well. And it's a very rare combination about sort of combining documentary filmmaking, media, photography, I would say even political activism at certain levels. And so I have a great pleasure to talk to you today. We are opening the first session of the 3 sessions. Tomorrow night we're talking to Lev Manovic, and you're opening the session. and let's start. So I did a very brief overall, but if you could introduce yourself more properly.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Start with the questions. Agata.
Thank you so much. Well, first of all, thank you so much for the invitation. I'm absolutely delighted to be here, and you've mentioned some incredible names. So it's a great honor to be here. So yes, my name is Agata Lulkowska. I was originally born in Poland, but I've been in the UK for the last 20 years, and I really specialize in creative practice research and support systems for any kind of creative practice research, whether this is filmmaking, photography, performance, you name it. This is what I'm trying to deal with. So my background is in film direction. This is what I studied. I also studied photography, digital media arts, a bit of fine art, a bit of acting, a bit of actually a bit of theater direction as well. So a bit of everything. But my official kind of education is in film direction, really. And so the reason, do you mind if I just let my dog out? I'm so sorry, this is embarrassing. He needs to go out. Right. So the reason I am doing what I'm doing at the moment, because I realize there's a lot of wonderful creative practice research going on, which doesn't really fit very neatly within one discipline. And this is what you, Sasha, and Maria do together, and separately. You kind of do amazing stuff together. And it doesn't necessarily fit very neatly within, very neatly defined disciplines, especially with all digital platforms, what happened after COVID, and what you were talking so nicely today, this morning in your opening keynote. So I realized there's lots of people doing really amazing stuff, and of course, embracing new technologies, embracing digital platforms, and all the new things which are emerging these days. And it's sometimes really difficult to fit within established principles of disciplines and journals and conferences. So that's why it's so nice to see conferences like this one happening, because it really looks beyond this kind of really rigidly established disciplines and silos, which is very important in something we really need. So what I started doing is, when I started supporting my colleagues and PhD students who kind of go slightly beyond those very strictly established rules, and they were very confused. They really didn't know what their identities were. They didn't know where they belong. And I started to be really passionate about. And that stems from my journey, because my PhD was in filmmaking, but I made a film with indigenous communities of Colombia. And because I was so naive at the time, I did it at the Iberian and Latin American studies, because I thought, well, I'm working in Colombia, I should probably just sit within this department. Well, I was actually making a film, so I should be in film studies. And it took me a very long time to get to the place where I feel really comfortable sitting in between all the disciplines. And this is where the Rebellious Research Seminar Series emerged. So the reason I call it Rebellious Research, because I advocate for people feeling really good and comfortable in a place they are, which very often means picking your own methodologies and methods, just doing a bit of a pick and mix of different things from different disciplines, from different ways of approaching the way you answer your research questions, and picking different ways of also disseminating your work. And your work, Sasha, here is really extraordinary in this matter, because obviously as a theater director, you do so many things which kind of go way beyond what normal standard theater director would do. So it's really inspiring. And that's what really drives my research at the same time. So just kind of thinking how you can cross those.
You kind of covered my questions. You're going quite well.
I'm sorry, I'm reading your mind.
Yeah, or you're reading the list of questions which Maria prepared.
Oh, I actually haven't. No, sorry, no.
She didn't send you.
No, I know. I prefer to improvise. I looked at them. I didn't prepare. I thought to, listen.
I think that's much better like that.
Yes.
Can you give us a brief overview of what is practice research from where you're coming from? I'm almost 10 years visiting professor here, and I'm teaching a course in digital performance on a PhDs.
Yes.
And that's part of the that's part of what this gentleman. Ivane, do you want just to say a few things about polymedia so that Agata can connect? Because this is meant more like a conversation. This
Yeah, please do, absolutely.
Good.
Yes, it's actually a very basic doctoral program in arts and interdisciplinary arts, where we go from we collect the students from all other artistic disciplines: visual arts, music arts, performing arts, and we try to combine and put all these things together and to experiment. So everybody is doing composing in digital media, doing animation, doing video, doing performances together. And we give different tasks connected with what Sasha was speaking in the morning. The first task they get is to create a video work, how environment affects human behavior and how human behavior changes environment. So with these kind of creative tasks, we give them open space and open time to explore and to do really wonderful doctoral artworks, which are in different fields, which are totally different. And that is what I consider to be a wealth of this program.
So this is polymedia studies, as they call it here, interdisciplinary. And Ivan is running that. Ivan is a co-director of this conference together with me and Paula Bottoms, three of us. So I just wanted to give you some sort of, insight into it. So in connection to that, how would you define practice research?
Yeah. Well, first of all, congratulations on what you're doing. That sounds really amazing. And I'm so happy to hear that this kind of things are happening. So as we all know, there's lots of definitions which define what we would normally think about people who use creative practice of any kind as a form of research. Now, what I do, I advocate against all the very strict definitions and differences between things like practice-based, practice-led, practice as research, and so on and so forth, because I think it just leads to more confusion rather than I'm sorry, making things easier. So what I really think is that the bottom line definition is, if your practice brings the answer to your research question, we are on the same page. We're thinking about creative practice research, and that's all definition. This is all kind of elements of a definition I need.
So if your creative practice responds to the research question, that's very good.
If it's essential to answer your research question, if you use your practice to just illustrate your research questions, which happens in a theoretical way, that's a different story. But if your practice is absolutely essential in order for you to answer the research question, that's what we're talking about. And of course, there are different ways you can do it. So there's many people who work towards expanding methods and methodologies. So one of my recent PhD students was working on a documentary film where he was trying to re-establish documentary filmmaking, where sound was the driving force of storytelling. Obviously, the way he was doing this, he was contributing to developing new methods and methodologies. Sometimes it's just about the final product. That is secondary, but he needed his practice to answer his research question. That is the bottom line for me. So I try to simplify things rather than overcomplicate them, because I think, as a community of researchers, like if you look at the places like UK and Australia, creative practice research has been going on for almost 4 decades. That's a very long time. And we're still very confused about the definition. So I think we have to simplify it rather than just add to the confusion.
Thank you. So what would be the key challenges? We talk quite a lot about AI, artificial intelligence. Especially the conference is dealing with the question of performative politics in digital media, arts, and culture.
Yes.
So what do you see as an AI is now emerging as one of the outlines of what's happening within the digital world now?
Yeah,
So
thank you. That's a great question.
The challenges of AI.
Yeah, it is a great question, and you kind of put me in a position of a visionary here, because obviously we have to wait and see. That's a short answer. I was asked the same question a few months ago at a conference in Ravensbourg, where we were talking about similar things here. long story short, what I think, there's obviously both challenges and opportunities. So some of the things which can be replaced by AI will inevitably take some, jobs away and reduce some people's inputs. At the same time, I'm rather optimistic in thinking that AI is just a tool like any other. So, when we moved from when cinema emerged, everyone was worried that theater is going to disappear. When internet emerged, everyone's feared that cinemas will disappear because people will just watch things online. It has never happened. Obviously, the dynamics have always changed, and that's what is inevitable. But I think AI is just a tool like any other. And yes, it will simplify and perhaps replace to some degree many of the things people do creatively. But I don't think it will completely overtake and replace everything we do as creative forces. So I see it more as a tool that will help us with some elements of what we do creatively rather than a replacement of it.
Do you see it as an opportunity then?
To some degree, yes. I think it really is. I don't see it in a black and white terms. I really think. I mean, I know lots of people. My partner here at home, included, whose job is probably going to be really. He's a VFX artist, so I think his job is going to really suffer in terms of what the results of of AI technologies are. But at the same time, I've spoken to many artists, also creative practice researchers within academia, who use AI in a very creative way. So I spoke to people who use AI to do experiments of this kind, for example. So they would write a script themselves, and they will give AI the same task of writing a very similar script based on the same principles. And the research they do is kind of comparing these two different scripts for a film. And interestingly enough, very often when they do kind of reception studies with their participants, they realize that people often confuse the script written by AI with the one written by a human. And they often think that the one written by AI is written by human and vice versa. So I think there's lots of interesting things which can, happen as I use AI. But at the same time, I'm also, as I said, I'm not overly optimistic. I know many people's lives will be for small components which can be just done by AI without you having to hire someone for many, many days.
I think it's interesting, this thing. I would like just to point this because tomorrow we're talking to Lev, and one of his key works was how artists create AI, and then how AI creates AI as an aesthetics. Yeah. About aesthetics of AI. So this is something that I think we're going to go back to, this whole question of how do artists work with AI, and then how AI works with AI. And
it's a very question.
We set up a difference. But anyway, now I'm gonna push it next level. As I said, it's open, so anybody I think could come in, yeah, because this is a conversation. I think you also want it to be this is a conversation, rather than Agata's hour. So let's start with this question about that's my PhD student. She comes late. All right. So this is the story now. I think people would know here. I think Ivan would know probably this more than me. In time of the Soviet avant-garde, they were playing a lot with film. The film montage, some of the they first done it, and David Griffith picked it up. There was a story about how they were traveling to different. It was still around the Soviet war with the white and red Russians, and there was a story about the train, and they were showing the train to the audience, and they put the camera, and then as the train was going like that towards the audience,
everyone was afraid. Yes.
The audience throw themselves on the floor.
Yes.
I think that's the. I don't know where was that exactly, but there was a story of how that was connected. I think it was part of the kind of Soviet avant-garde. And so the condition that created cinema in many ways, if you follow Soviet avant-garde, and then obviously moving that to the silent filming states and all that, were driven by the social conditions.
Yes.
At that particular time. And they kind of gave birth to film in a way, these necessities, social necessities.
Yes.
Political necessities. So What are the political necessities that are creating AI nowadays?
You put me on the spot here. I mean, look, it's a very interesting question. Actually, speaking to my students yesterday, and we were kind of contextualizing experimental film, and they were giving some examples from the 80s when I was a little girl, a tiny little girl in the 80s, and they were talking about the 80s as if it was like Stone Age, really. I felt really old at that point. And what they were comparing...
Agata, half of the people in this room were not born in the 80s. What can we do?
It's just, you know, like this kind of thing about social situation, political situation is obviously very dynamic, really. So I think what we have to talk about here is, I think it's a combination of at least two components. So obviously the technological development, which happens somehow organically, we cannot really predict it. And the way you can trace it is if you look at the old sci-fi films which predict the future, and they think that in the year 2000 we're gonna be having flying cars and teleportations and God knows what. Obviously has never happened. So that's one thing. So this kind of technological development happens in its own pace and is determined by so many different things which we don't really have access to. And also the social political situation of also different countries, because you cannot really talk about social political situation on a global scale, because to your point, Sasha, it obviously is very different in different places. There's very often, he really wants to be part of this conference. There's also very often, and you talked about it this morning to some degree, conflicts, and obviously we live in a time when which is marked by many really unpleasant conflicts at the time of this conference, really. So you cannot really talk about kind of social political situation on a global scale, which is coherent and even. So obviously the technological development, AI, and whenever we do new things, it kind of stems from this combination of both technology and social political things. Now, you yourself in your keynote this morning, which I really enjoyed, talked a little bit about a kind of some level of manipulation. So I think we cannot avoid, making it clear that media is not necessarily an innocent representation of what's going on in the world. And it has never been the case with things like documentary filmmaking. This idea of objectivism and reality, kind of representing reality in objective terms, has been debunked many times in the past. And obviously the same applies to media. And talking about conflicts in terms of the social political situation, there will always be some kind of agendas which your media representation or visual representation serves. And your research is to many degrees about it as well. So I kind of second what you say here. But of course, what happens, technology, the way it works, social media, digital platforms, they completely change the way we interact with that, and kind of engagement. And, I think we should probably mention Marshall McLuhan here, and this concept of global village, and how many decades ago he actually predicted this kind of strange connectedness of people around the globe, where at the same time we're very separate, and we sit in our very comfortable chairs. You're in this beautiful room. I'm here in my room in Midlands in England, and we talk about so many different things, and yet all these things are happening out there. We feel like we're connected because we look at images that depict those things. But we just really speaking from the position of academics, and we shouldn't forget about it, who have the privilege of using different theories and knowledge we have to kind of talk in a semi-eloquent way about what's going on out there, but we're not really affected directly about it. So I think it's really also important to acknowledge that.
Okay, so since we're touching now about social aspects of things, from your discipline, from your experience, as you have done film, which looked into different modalities of life.
Yeah.
What is your take from your discipline on social activism and connecting that with the digital world, which we kind of acknowledge that is sort of making things in a way more personal to us. I was talking this morning about Instagram, and
Yes.
First morning on Instagram, and I'm I'm in a hospital in Gaza that was bombed.
Yeah.
And so it becomes sort of shared experience. So what would be your role of social, how do you see from your discipline, the role of social activism?
Yeah, no, again, a great question. So there's lots of things I can talk about here, because if you think about what social activism really means, the most simple definition is that it means, making some kind of significant change in terms of or bringing social change of some kind, which the society feels is needed. So that could really cover many, many potential situations on the many different scales, from a kind of community of your neighborhood where maybe you need to do something to do with your neighborhood runs, to things which again relate to global scale. So that's quite a wide range here. And the example you've given kind of links us back to what we talked about a moment ago, the kind of political situation of the globe, really. Now, when we talk about filmmaking, because I'm going to talk about filmmaking as my main discipline, even though there's lots of disciplines I really identify with. So I think filmmaking, from the 60s, when first the light cameras were introduced, and then again in the 90s and 2000s, where the digital technology kind of emerged, and obviously filmmaking slightly changed the kind of ownership, if you like. So today you can argue that everyone is a filmmaker. So if there's something going on in terms of the news, you have people recording things with mobile phones, and that goes to mainstream media as a kind of news footage. So you can argue that everyone is a filmmaker. So going back to your question, Sasha, it is really, it kind of depends on your definition of what you think about, because at the moment, like anyone, literally anyone, a 9-year-old child who has a mobile phone can become a filmmaker who provides a contribution to audiovisual contribution, which again depends on how much we stretch our definition of what filmmaking is, in relation to politics and social political situations, can provide commentary, which again, going back to Marshall McLuhan and what we talked about before, will link us all together in terms of making available for us to look at the same images and relate to the situation which somehow affect us to some degree. And obviously social media, digital platforms are just a way to make it even more accessible and more available for everyone. So I think the question can be answered, depends what we're talking about. But in the context of this conference and what is being what is the main theme of it, I think the question is very open. Like literally everyone has access to the possibility to record audiovisual messages and share it on digital platforms and social media. So we all globally contribute to that. And I think there's no way to kind of avoid thinking this way. And yes, I can give you a very elitist answer to that as well. I say, well, I'm a filmmaker because I'm trained as a filmmaker, because I spent X amount of years being trained in a film school, and that gives me the authority to to have this label. But the reality is not that. The reality, I'm just one of many other, and my filmmaking practice might be more refined if I want to, but it doesn't really change the effect it can have compared to with a video taken by a 9-year-old child and posted on Instagram and shared with you and everyone else.
So this brings us to another question, which is, you did a film in Colombia, which was when? When was that?
It was like 2015, I think. Losing count of my time. Yeah. So
technology was okay. It was not as digitally developed as now, because now you have like iPhone 14, which is what I have. It has amazing camera, and I could be filming whatever I want to. I just don't know how, so I don't. But I have technology to do it.
Yes.
And basic edit, and as you said, a 9-year-old can then access things and put them on a web and platforms.
Yes.
And if we go back to late 20th century and early, when we have a big influence of documentary filming,
yes,
influence on media and all that. That's also. But however, nowadays with the advance of digital technology and the whole kind of digital media and arts and culture, there is a sense of the individualization of the experience. So where is this taking us? For example, let me give you a clear example.
Yeah.
Again, I was following because I'm sticking with Instagram, so I follow that as my kind of source of research.
Yeah.
There was this hurricane. What was the last name? The name on the last one that hit America on M.
Yeah, no, I know what you're talking about, but I don't know.
That was a big hurricane that hit America. Yes. They gave him a name on M, and it was 2 days ago.
Yes.
And it's very interesting that a lot of people were actually outside with their phones filming it and having like thousands of people following them. Yeah. And they were talking to people how they're going to report and how they're going to engage and how they're going to tell them. Yeah. And suddenly, like if you would have a media outlet with a camera capturing the event, that has been now shifted to a private use. Yeah. X amount of people doing that. Yeah. So that shift from officialization of something, you know, I'm officially representing something, to unofficial discourse, where we are entering into discussion through digital platforms. Yeah. What do you think that would create? What do you think that would give us where we are now or where we're going to go in the future?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it really links to what I talked about a moment ago. So, you know, like I personally really welcome it because I don't really, you can compare it to kind of academic circles. We all know we sit in this really tightly defined silos. You know, it's my discipline. I'm an expert. I have a title. You know, I'm a professor. I have a title of a doctor, so I'm an expert. But that's nonsense. We cannot think like that because we become completely detached from reality, and many people are uncomfortable to talk about it. But I really think we have to kind of bring it back to the ground and see what happens on the streets, what people really think, what they want to see, how they see things as well. And perhaps kind of find the middle ground in between that. And I understand that there is a difference, again, what I talked about before in terms of some kind of quality and you know, level of professionalism, which can be applicable to certain situations. So perhaps if you want to make a professional film which goes to a cinematic distribution, perhaps you do need to have a little bit more background in terms of how to make things right and everything. But in terms of news and media and kind of capturing situations which are happening like that, and the example you've just given being one of them, I really think there's more value in someone just going out there with with their latest iPhone or whatever kind of portable technology of video recording they have, rather than just me going with a whole crew and filming. In fact, you've mentioned my film in Colombia. I'm gonna give you a very, very kind of short anecdote about it, because exactly the same thing happened, Sasha. So what happened is, like, when I went there, I realized that a group of so for anyone who kind of needs a bit more background, so it was a project I did with indigenous communities in northern Colombia, and they basically started making films about the difficult situation in northern Colombia. So things like, domestic, not domestic, kind of violence, which was happening in the region, displacements, and, all sorts of issues which happened there. And they decided to start making films about it to kind of speak for themselves and communicate the worries they had. And I found it really fascinating. So I just went there. I wanted to make a film with them. And then I realized when I went there, they were actually really very much against people who made films about them, because they said, we don't need you anymore. We are very, very capable of making our own films. We don't need you to come there and film and speak for us. So my initial plan was I didn't bring any crew from the UK. I was planning to pair up with people from the film school in Santa Marta, Sierra Nevada in northern Colombia. But the moment I realized I actually don't want any film crews, I just gave up on this idea, and I traveled with them, helped them with their own filmmaking. I did some, to basically help them with their own films. I did some translations for them. And then at some point they asked me, so when are you going to start making your own film? And all I had was my camera my microphone and some really kind of clumsy tripod, and I started making my film. That's how I made it. So it was just, I was my only crew. There was absolutely nobody with me. So technically it wasn't the best film ever, and I wrote about it in many papers, how at the expense of technical proficiency, I managed to get really amazing films because I had access to what they really were doing. I had access to the whole group of people who were making the films. I could talk to them. I made friends with them. I spent 3 months with them. Had I brought a crew of professional filmmakers with me, it would be a very different dynamics. It would look much better in terms of the technical aspect of it, but the content just simply wouldn't be there. So it's the exact response to what you're talking about right now, Sasha. So it really is the question about what is more important. Is it technical qualities of your films, which I argue makes more sense if you're making fiction filmmaking for cinematic distribution, but when it's to do with research filmmaking, when it's to do with certain documentaries, and more specifically news, and then kind of documenting and reflecting what's actually going on in front of our eyes, hurricanes, political situations, and so on and so forth, it doesn't really matter that much what kind of camera you use. You just have to capture the moment, and you have to be really fast and quick. Well, that's just the dynamic. They serve completely different purposes. And we cannot be arrogant about it. I cannot say, well, I'm a filmmaker, I know better how to do this, because the 9-year-old child's footage will be definitely much better and of much value in that situation than mine.
We have a question in the chat.
Yeah, we'll come to the question. Let me just kill my question, and then we'll do the chat and open up. I have basically my kind of last question will be about your book. Can you tell us about your book? They just came out.
Yeah.
And about work, because we are, we're here both research, but also we're pedagogy. Related.
Yes. Yeah.
So what you're talking to us is also important in terms of the pedagogy of practice research that people are thinking about.
Yeah.
So about the
thank you for that question.
The year, the publisher, where we can buy it, all of that.
Thank you for this question. I mean, this is a book which I'm really proud of. So the book is called Filmmaking in Academia, Creative Practice Research for Filmmakers. And the reason I wrote it is because of all the things I've mentioned in this short conversation. So I've worked with so many people who feel very uncomfortable sitting between disciplines, not really knowing where they belong, and not really understanding, doing amazing things, and not really understanding how to frame their creative practice research, in this specific case, filmmaking as research. But I know that obviously what you do is more to do with performance. So just to kind of open it up, I'm writing now a series of books. It's a book series for intellect, which is to do with creative practice research in academia in general. So I'm kind of trying to find a kind of really generic ideas of what creative practice research is, whether this is filmmaking, still images, performance, I don't know, anything, and kind of capture how someone who is a creative practitioner and don't really understand how to frame their practice as research can do it in relation to the requirements of what academia asks you. So things like, your research questions, methodologies, how to think about dissemination, how to think about impact, how to think about all the things we are being held accountable for. But at the same time, how you manage this idea of being really free in your creative practice, but at the same time rigorous when it comes to your research, because this is what many people have a lot of problems with. And the reason I wrote that book and writing the new one is because I realized there's lots of people who've been working as creative practitioners for many years, sometimes decades, and they still really struggle to position themselves as academics, even though they work in academia for many years. So they kind of very accomplished artists or creative practitioners working in academia, but really struggling to put these two things together. And it's very frustrating for me personally, because obviously I see a lot of value in what they do, and I see how they can really influence and impact both communities interested in art and research and general public, but also academia, and get funding for this and get a really kind of evidence of impact. So that's what it is. So the first book has been published, I think it was June or July this year. It's if you type my name, there's only one person who's called Agata Lulkowska. It's quite easy to find me. It's called filmmaking.
Agata, you will send me an email because I would like to have a full reference of your book and also the web link to Rebellious Research.
With
Because
pleasure.
these are two important sources, and we will distribute them to people who are here, they're from all over the world, but also it will sort of go into different academias, you know.
With pleasure, absolutely. Thank you, Sasha.
Thank you. This is so cool. Can we go, as Ilan said, can we look into the question? We have some questions in the chat.
Yeah, of course. Should I read it loud? Because I see it here.
Yes, please.
I have a question, Agata. You discussed how you engage in practice research, in practice-based research across different disciplines. My question is about methodologies. Do you have an overall practice-based methodology, or each discipline's methodologies have an impact in a way practice-based research is shaped? Has the use of digital tools supported in some way the development of these shared practice-based methodologies? Thank you so much for the question. Long story short, I don't think there is one size fits all approach to these kind of things. And I really strongly discourage anyone thinking that there is a template to follow. There is some kind of template to follow in a sense of what kind of things academia will ask you to do. And defining your methodologies is one of them. What those methodologies are, it should be really definitely down to your specifics of your projects. And this is where the challenge happens very often. And I've had this conversation multiple times in many discussions of this kind. So people say, well, my project is really different from what other people have done. Hence, I have problems to locate it within specific disciplines. Hence, I have problems to actually define what my methods and methodologies are. What do I do with this? And my answer always is just to not worry about what the other things or what other people are doing, but really think very carefully about what your project brings to as a new contribution to knowledge. And again, I cannot stress it enough. Your work, Sasha, and Maria's work and what you do together is probably a prime example of what can be used here. Like, you really define your own methods and methodologies. You just really break all the boundaries. You're really rebellious in terms of what you do. And I love that, because this is the way we can really contribute to new knowledge in an innovative way, which is at the same time very rigorous, because you're both very rigorous, but you don't feel like you need to be limited by the way things have been done in the past. And you look into new technologies, you look into new ways of how the society is being shaped. You basically are up to date with what's going on in the world, while you still remaining very firmly grounded in your disciplines, and you collaborate at the same time. So this is a really great answer to this question. So there is no set methods and methodologies which will be applicable to one's project. You really have to think very freshly and kind of think, what are the things that relate to me and I can use, and what are things that I perhaps limiting. And the way I always think about it is I'm all about breaking the rules, and that's why I call my seminar Rebellious Research. But I always say, like, following Picasso, you have to know your rules before you break them. So you cannot just do some kind of random things without understanding what your contexts are. You need to understand what your rules are, and then obviously feel free to break them. But then you need to be able to explain what rules you broke and why it serves your purpose.
Thank you so much. Well, let's have a chat now about this. I might just conclude by saying that what they're doing here with the PhD program that Ilan is running, it's very much that. Different disciplines coming, they're very fresh, everybody working from their own, and work is quite remarkable. So let's open the floor.
Yes, any questions? Questions, comments?
Well, I will try.
Introduce yourself just a little.
Of course. Well, hello. Thank you for this lecture and introduction on your scope of research. My name is Uroš. I come from the NGO Museum of Popular and Subculture. So my main research focus is popular culture in general. And I'm really interested in different methodologies regarding that. So I don't know if this is really in scope of your current research efforts, but I could not help but wonder since I heard some recent podcasts on this topic, and now I'm going to explain what I'm thinking about. So, there are different methods that include in popular music that include and require for an anthropologist or ethnologist to be part of creative process when it comes to creating this popular music. For example, you have some ethnographers who are being part of some local bands in some local societies, and they're writing their own diaries using diary methods, etc. So what is your opinion on this? Do you think that there is a strong point of subjectivity when some people are being part of a local band or local community whilst creating this content or this artistic product? And do you think that there are some ways to mitigate that moment of subjectivity, or perhaps one researcher should not even have to mitigate this subjectivity? That's part of the research process itself.
Yeah, love the question. Thank you so much. Fantastic question, really. So I think it's absolutely impossible for you to detach yourself from your creative practice as an artist. So if you're a creative practice researcher, ethnography must be part of your methodologies. Otherwise, it's just trying to really, really hard fit within what traditional sciences, hard sciences, try to tell you about objectivity of your research, which basically doesn't work for us. So absolutely, I think there's a massive, huge value in ethnography, journals and subjectivity. And yes, it's not the only way to validate your research. It cannot possibly, but it's a very useful one. And there's lots of great literature which talks about ethnography and kind of subjectivity in creative practice research. But I don't think we can ever detach ourselves from that. And I understand why you're asking this question, because obviously that's one of the reasons some traditional scientists say, well, this is not science, this is not research, this is not, rigorous enough, because you just do something and think about whether you like it or not. But it doesn't work like this. It's absolutely inevitable to, because this is where you reflect on your process. This is when you reflect on your aims and objectives. And in fact, funny you ask this question, because in my book, the one Sasha has mentioned about filmmaking in academia, one of the main things I'm trying to do over there is to really provide the answer of how to manage this creative chaos and creative freedom we have and academic rigor. And the way I'm trying to tackle it is to create this kind of idea of a roadmap where you have a specific point. So for example, from point A to B, which could be from January to March, you're experimenting with your discipline. So whatever your discipline is, you're just doing things and trying things and don't worry about anything else. Then from point B to point C, which could be March to May, for example, you're reflecting on it. And during that period, you don't actually practice anything, you don't actually do anything, but you consider all the things you've done in the previous kind of element, and you use auto-ethnography and reflexivity, and you think, am I heading the right direction? Am I my aims, objectives the same as I thought at the beginning? Have they shifted? And if they shifted, do I like the new direction, or do I need to reshift and go back to the what I originally thought was the right thing? So there's an incredible value in auto-ethnography, because it really keeps you, it allows you to both expand your research question and evolve it to a new directions you were not aware of in the first place. But at the same time, there might be a situation where you just get overly excited about some new things and you think, well, actually, I have to bring it back to the place where I were before, because I'm not heading the right direction. I'm kind of digressing too much. So there's massive value in there. And it doesn't matter what your discipline is. There's actually a very rigorous way of applying ethnography and subjectivity in research. And it's very, very rigorous. It's just slightly different to traditional scientists. But I really think, I personally am sick and tired of having to justify it. I think there's lots of rigor over there, and we should not feel ashamed of using that. It's amazing.
Thank you so much. This is good for you, right?
Yes, honestly, I really.
We're recording this. You can transcribe it.
Yes, thank you for giving me all the points and documentation.
And then you say, Agata says this. And then everybody, F off. Okay, do you have anything I think we could maybe ask?
Yes, please.
I was recently thinking, just to introduce myself, I'm a performance artist, but I come from sociology. So
Yes.
You go explain where you're from all that.
my name is Inga Gerner Nielsen and I'm from Denmark. And sometimes I've actually felt that my knowledge of what research is as qualitative research has been a bit of a clutch for me as an artist. Because I know what actually a real qualitative study requires. So then I've taken a postgraduate program in artistic research in Brussels lately, which was really fantastic because that's really with the emphasis on artistic research. So I feel like I'm a bit freed of all of my methodological, otherwise dogmas. But then still, sometimes when I see artistic research, I can also get a little bit, somehow, a little bit like, where is the research? Because I sometimes find that a lot of the time, I know as an artist, I might like actually want to just produce an image. And I search for materials that will help me finally materialize my image, but that I'm trying to get to the point now that it's like you talked in the beginning about, you mentioned it briefly about sometimes research the artistic work becomes about illustrating a point. And I find sometimes I see that in what people call artistic research. Where I can say already know what the end will be. And then I start to question then, is that then research? If from the beginning, actually, you know what you want to present, you know what I mean? I feel like there's
absolutely.
It's like, actually, does research require us to have an open question?
Now I'm gonna complicate things a little bit more, because I think Agata has already ready answer for this. And my complication will be this. Not all art is research.
Thank you, Sasha. Absolutely.
And what was this?
Not all research is artistic.
Not all research is
artistic.
Yes.
I'm talking about practice.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't stress it more. Fantastic questions. I mean, I love the questions in this room. They're really profound.
Clever people here.
They really are. Yes, no, absolutely. Absolutely not all art is research. And there's nothing wrong about it. If you do know what your answer is at the beginning, that obviously is not a research. Illustrating your research through art is not a research. It's just an illustration. This is not an art. And I write a lot about it in my book. And maybe some people will be offended about it because I just say, like, not all the films are research, and it could be great films. They could have great distributions, they can make a box office, but they will not bring anything to research, and that's absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong about it. So occasionally very bad films will be great research because they will answer some really profound question in a clumsy way occasionally, because very often there's not enough budget and things like that. But to your point, absolutely, these things are I think it's about the clarity of what we're talking about. These things are slightly different categories. And I actually recently wrote an article about creative practice research as a form of conceptual art. And you probably understand why I'm heading with this, because if you think what conceptual art is the situation where you have an idea of some kind, a conceptual idea, and you use your creative practice to explore this idea, but not illustrate, explore it in some way. And I could talk a lot about creative practice research as a conceptual art here. But this is what we're doing with creative practice research. So you have some research questions, some concept, and you use your creative practice, your performance, your film, your play, as a way of exploring that research question. And your answer, again, going back to what I said at the very beginning, comes through your practice. So your practice is absolutely necessary for you to answer that question. You don't know what the answer is until you make your practice, until you go through your practice. That's what it is. And that's why I think it's a useful concept for people who are slightly confused about that kind of things, to think about creative practice research as a conceptual art, because it will then, you will avoid having this kind of confusion whether if it's a great art, great, but if it doesn't actually lead to answer some kind of question or direction or inquiry, then it's a different thing.
And I want to jump in as well. I want to complicate things. Robert Lapage is a Québécois, film director, performance artist, theater director. He said something about his work. So he quotes from somewhere, and I quote him. Christopher Columbus went to India. He was going to India to find the road. That's his starting point. But he found a new continent. He died thinking that he found India.
Yeah.
But he found a continent. So that he often uses the Lapage because it's a very intuitive improvisational way of working, where you may start with one thing, thinking that you know where you're going, but you're in a different position. We have one more, I think, question or conclusion. Ivan, would you like something to say?
Okay, yes, I would like to conclude and to connect and wrap up some things. It is that theory has affected arts a lot, especially through conceptual arts, which is by Joseph Koshut, analytical proposition. But actually, traditional art is synthetic proposition. And arts took different methodologies of research, yet arts what gave to theory is about gaining experience. Especially from quantum mechanics, hermeneutics, these are very artistic disciplines inside of science and theory. So this creating experience by the arts and by the creation of arts, it is actually for me the end point of artificial intelligence, because you're the only one who can create experience for us. And this is what is our blessing. Let's say it like this. And this is what art can give to us.
Yeah.
Both for Agata and for an amazing conclusion. Okay. Any final comments, Agata, before we switch off?
No, I mean, thank you so much. I think, again, fantastic conference. I think you're bringing together really nice, thought-provoking things in line with both technologies. I think what's great about this conference that you're bringing together, as I said, like not just technological aspects of what's going on, because that's sometimes very limiting and people just focus on the technology itself, but you're bringing those things to the real world and how it affects the society and kind of socio-political situation and how it affects us as creative practice researchers. So it's just really well done to you. Congratulations. Fantastic thing. Fantastic questions. Thank you so much. And
thank you for coming. Thank you so much for coming. Yeah, and please make sure I get your book and the link to Rebellious research, because I would like to share that with colleagues. As you can see, this could be very helpful to people.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
And once again, Associate Professor Agata Lulkowska, one of the rising stars of our little world.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy your afternoon.
And now go enjoy the weather.
Yeah, the weather is awful here. It really is. All right. Take care, everyone. Have a lovely evening.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye.